When you think of multi-award-winning shows such as How You Met Your Mother and Peep Show, you think of a very elaborate set-off with hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment scattered around the studio. But in truth, a lot of it is filmed with single camera technique. Single camera technique definitely has its advantages over multicam. When renting and or buying equipment, it is significantly cheaper only using one camera. However, it takes up a lot more of the actor's time. When actors pay by the hour, it will be a lot more cost efficient for a multicam setup than a single cam. My first example is one of a tracking shot. This is where the camera is either handheld or mounted on a track and dolly, and it follows the subject on their journey to a place. This is effective as it puts the viewer in the situation of the subject, showing them the path that they walked. A similar shot type to tracking shot is panning shot. This is where the camera pans horizontally to follow a subject walking through a room, for example. This can be effective as it can show a detail and then show that it belongs to the person who's in the room. A tilt shot is very, very similar to a panning shot, except from instead of rotating on horizontal axes, it rotates on a vertical axis. This could either show the height of a person or something that a person is doing. This is an example of an over-shoulder shot. This is great for a conversation as it can show both sides of an argument. It's also very important to follow the 180 degree rule. This is where the camera stays within 180 degrees of the subjects. This is an example of a static shot. This is a very, very simple shot which just helps to set the scene, or as a tiny bit of filler footage. My next example is of a bird's eye view shot. This is shot either from a helicopter with a camera mounted or a drone with a camera mounted to it. It is especially used in establishing shots as it's really good for setting the scene. My next example is of a worm's eye view shot. This is a shot from the ground, looking up. It's extremely effective when looking at a daunting character such as a biker. It makes the person look more intimidating to the viewer. It's also very good for showing height, unlike a building, for example. Reverse reaction is a technique where it shows the reaction of the subject in the film after either seeing something, doing something, or reacting to something said by another character. Depth of field is a technique where it shows the distance covered by a subject, or the distance needed to be covered. Lighting can be very, very important in production. The way you light a scene can have a very, very different image. Say if a bright and happy scene was lit very, very dimly, it wouldn't have the same effect as if it was lit nice and brightly. An example of a nice, bright, happy scene is a sitcom, where all the lights are nice and bright and colourful, and you can clearly see the subjects and things in the background. The exact opposite of this would be low-key lighting. This is where it's very, very dark and dingy, and it gives a sense of underground workings, so to speak. One other lighting technique is shadows. A hard shadow is a shadow with a very, very defined edge, so you can clearly see the shape that is blocking the light. This is put good to use in silhouette work, as seen here. The exact opposite to hard lighting is soft lighting. This is where barely any shadows can be seen. This is where the subject is surrounded by lighting, so that there isn't anywhere for the shadow to be cast. It gives a really happy feel, and it's almost always shot in studio, and it's very, very difficult to recreate outside. Gotche's video is a very, very good example of this. You can clearly see in the background there's no shadows, and the subject, which is Gotcha himself, is very, very well lit. Lighting is very, very important in a production. Your ears are more likely to be offended before your eyes. This is why it's very, very important to have a very, very clear microphone and very, very sensible sound within the scene.
Sounds in the 70s.
This scene from Reservoir Dogs is a very, very good example of the diegetic sound. You can clearly see the gentleman in the sea turning on the radio, and then you can hear music playing. This is an advantage over pre-recorded music or dubbed music, as it puts you in the scene a lot better. It also adds to the comedic effect, as it's playing a happy song in quite a dark and dreary scene. This can be really, really effective in films like this. Jurassic Park is a very, very good example of non-diegetic noise. This is because dinosaurs are long past extinct, so no longer exist to make sounds for films. So the roar from the Tyrannosaurus Rex would have to be pre-recorded in a studio. The show Peep Show is a very good example of dialogue. This is where the speech is added over the top of film to make the viewer more aware of what is happening. In this scene, this is a person's thoughts being projected over a sound over the film.
If there's one thing JLB does not need, it's a maverick.
Dialogue can also be overdubbed or changed. Bad lip reading have a very nice series of videos expressing this.
A friend of mine got a foot, and it's juicy.
What the hell are you talking about?
You know, fish can hear you thinking just before you sneeze.
Choppy chop chop. What's choppy chop chop?
Narrative structure is how you would categorise a production. For instance, you couldn't categorise a documentary and an action film under the same title. One of these categories is realist. This is where a production is very, very realistic and can be believed by the viewer. A good example of this is a documentary where it's based purely on facts and figures. Opposite end of the scale to this would be non-realist, where a scene or a film is so ridiculous it really can't be believed. For instance, this scene from Expendables. Scenes like this are very, very popular in action films, as it couldn't really happen in real life. One other category in narrative structure is linear productions. This is where all the events taking place in the production happen in chronological order. This is very, very simple to understand by the viewer. This makes it much more simpler to edit together and much more simpler to film.
Until now, I've had better things to do.
However, productions like How You Met Your Mother or Pulp Fiction aren't in order at all. In How You Met Your Mother, whenever they talk about a subject or something that happened in the past, it immediately cuts to a scene containing that, not just them talking about it, meaning this is a non-linear format.
Part of our lives. So the only way you're allowed to hook up with her is if you marry her.
Too rich for my blood. The son of a bitch did it.
He really did.
One other example of narrative structure is the endings of your production. These can be in one or two categories: open or closed. Open endings are also known as a cliffhanger. In this example, they're quite literally left on a cliffhanger as the bus hangs off the edge of a cliff. It cuts away when the bloke says,
"Hang on a minute, lads. I've got a great idea.
and then this is where the film ends. This leaves it open to sequels. and leaves the viewer wanting to watch the next episode. The opposite end to this would be close endings. This is where the production team put to bed any hope of there being a sequel or a second part. This can either be achieved by killing off the main character or ending the main story and having no longer threats. This is very, very good when ending a sitcom or a series, just to let people know it's actually finished.